The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency David Panuelo, President and Head of the Government of the Federated States of Micronesia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency David Panuelo, President and Head of the Government of the Federated States of Micronesia, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Secretary General, Excellencies, President Dicani Mohamed Bande, I congratulate you on your assuming your role in this esteemed body. Secretary General Antonio Guterres, thank you for your pivotal role in galvanizing the world to fight against climate change and the challenges of our global community. Leaders of the world, I bring you warm greetings from the Federated States of Micronesia. I have the distinct honor and special pleasure to address this assembly on behalf of the people of the Federated States of Micronesia. As a sovereign state, my country greatly values this opportunity to be able to reach out to every peace-loving nation in the world represented today in this assembly. We are at a critical crossroad. The challenges we are facing collectively as a global community are unprecedented. This assembly, being the main deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ of the United Nations, must be innovative and be ready to adapt to emerging realities and issues confronting us. For Micronesia, and this may be shared by most members of this assembly, further strengthening the role of the United Nations in international relations is imperative and indispensable. The role of the United Nations in maintaining peace and stability throughout the world, more than ever, very important as the world is increasingly finding itself confronted with conflicts, wars, refugees fleeing, borders closing, and many states turning inwards, with the mistaken belief that global unity undermines national sovereignty. Tragically, the world's poorest and most vulnerable communities are often at the mercy of those who could have made constructive and progressive changes. Meanwhile, record-breaking heat waves, wildfires, king tides, and bewildering natural disasters have become prevalent in many parts of the world. Environmental crises in particular are of unprecedented scale and magnitude unknown in human history. Our world is becoming complex, our environment changing, and our challenges becoming more and more daunting. Micronesia remains committed to extending what we seek from all countries, namely peace, cooperation, friendship, and love in our common humanity. We are resolute that there is no greater strength than respect and empathy for other human beings. It is through this resolve that we are committed to global unity in the United Nations, and I appeal to you all that we need to show that we are united in our response to these challenges. As you know, 22 years have passed since the adoption of the Kyoto Protocol, and 4 years since the adoption of the Paris Agreement. These agreements have strong appeal for us, the small island developing states, as a matter of common sense and survival. Climate change and its far-reaching effects and threats to the future of small island developing states are, to us, unbearable. Those of us from low-lying atolls and coastal areas across the Pacific are living the reality of climate change. This reality has become our nightmare. The chorus of appeals and pleas, in particular by leaders from small island developing states from this podium, demonstrate the extent to which our peoples at the front line of climate change are alarmed by the impacts of climate change on our planet and the fate of our present and future generations. I believe that action speaks louder than words, and I have told my citizens that our actions today are critical to our country's prosperity tomorrow. In the same vein, our world's actions today are critical to our global prosperity tomorrow. Climate change is real, so we must all take the necessary actions to ensure our survival. Mr. President, Micronesia is addressing the existential threat of climate change, noting that it is important to solve climate change without protecting the ocean, the largest carbon sink in the world. We have partnered with the Blue Prosperity Coalition to create a comprehensive climate-smart marine spatial plan for our exclusive economic zone. This partnership will further enhance national capacity to conserve marine resources and ecosystems, including by establishing marine protected areas and at least 30% of our exclusive economic zone. This MPA, or Marine Protected Area coverage, will become one of the world's largest. Micronesia is also committed to strengthening the monitoring and control of fishing activities through the Technology for Tuna Transparency T3 Challenge in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. This initiative implements electronic monitoring in tuna fisheries to reach the goal of 100% transparency and coverage by 2023. A few years ago, Micronesia enacted a national law making mandatory for all sectors in the national government to mainstream climate change in all of their policies and action plans. This ongoing mainstreaming efforts is the first for the Pacific Island countries and underscores our commitment to addressing climate change in all aspects. One of the consequences is that there has been extensive solarization in various public and economic sectors throughout Micronesia. Additionally, it was Micronesia that championed the negotiation and adoption of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol to phase down the production and consumption of hydrofluorocarbons. Scientists tell us that the successful implementation of the amendment can lead to the avoidance of up to 0.5 degree Celsius of global warming, which is crucial in light of the recent findings in the IPCC special report of 1.5 degrees. The amendment entered into force in January of this year, and we encourage international community to put into action this crucial component of the fight against climate change. Moreover, a ban on most forms of plastic reducing our carbon footprint has been in place by virtue of state legislations, with a proposed national bill that aims on imposing a ban on imported plastics on a countrywide scale. Furthermore, Micronesia is in the process of updating our NDC for submission next year. These are only some of the initiatives that our country is engaged in to take actions today for our world's environmental prosperity tomorrow. We encourage our partners to join us in this effort, including through the provision of necessary support. Mr. President, I urge the United Nations system step up to address climate change as an integral part of its work, including, and perhaps most importantly, the United Nations Security Council. The Security Council must transcend its traditional mandates and address the security implications of climate change. Climate change is the single greatest security issue facing the world at present, and it affects each and every one of us. The General Assembly recently adopted a resolution calling for greater support and cooperation with the Pacific Island countries. I want to take that a step further. The United Nations was formed to prevent the onslaught of a possible World War III or other man-made calamities. We are presently in a war against climate change, and it is a war that humanity can win if we first acknowledge this existential threat, and that the Security Council treat it as such, because this is in fact a security threat. We must be radical in combating climate change. It may be very difficult for us to do and painful to transition from one lifestyle to another, but we owe it to our future generations across the globe. Those who are protesting outside on our streets, the youth who joined the Secretary General during the Climate Action Summit, and all people who depend on us to actually and legitimately speak for them to do what must be done. Mr. President, recently the U.S. Department of Defense report stated that the effects of a changing climate are a national security issue with potential impacts to Department of Defense missions, operational plans, and installations. The United States provides for the overall defense of the vast airspace and ocean space of the freely associated states, namely Micronesia, Palau, and the Marshall Islands, while collectively the United States, Australia, and Japan provide for the overall peace, safety, and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific region. There is no greater security issue to our blue Pacific continent than climate change. This is an existential threat to our countries. Nobody is immune to climate change, including even the most developed countries. For example, the United States. To be able to adapt to or minimize the adverse effects of climate change, the United States has invested billions of dollars in coastal areas like Florida, California, New York, and Hawaii, to name a few. Large states are vulnerable too. I have faith in the citizens of the United States to keep pushing their government to embrace renewable energy and become more sympathetic to the Blue Pacific narrative. We encourage the United States and other leading developed countries to champion the fight against climate change. The United States and its citizens are our true friends and our closest ally in our enduring relationship. The meeting of presidents of Micronesia, Palau, and Marshall Islands with President Trump in May, and the visit from Secretary Pompeo to the FSM in August demonstrates that our relationship is enduring, special, perpetual, and sincere. We look forward to beginning and completing the negotiations on the expiring provisions of our Compact of Free Association. Mr. President, while it is gratifying to see the United Nations embrace the value of universal membership to address global issues, the realities of the 21st century are not adequately addressed by the current setup of the Security Council. To make the Security Council better and respond effectively to the new challenges of a new era, we must work together to reform the Council. The time has come for the reform to move forward. Mr. President, as we gather here at the United Nations, it is truly regrettable that we are again witnessing the far-reaching and apocalyptic effects of climate change, like what devastated our sister, small island developing state of Bahamas. It only lends credence to what small island developing states have warned for many years. It is clear that ambitious actions on the climate so urgently required by members of this organization can save the most vulnerable among us. To the people and the government of Bahamas, my heart goes out to you during this time of national crisis, and I offer Micronesia's solidarity and condolences. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to express my personal appreciation to the Secretary General for his visit to the Pacific this year. Secretary General Guterres is only the second Secretary General of the United Nations to visit the Pacific small island developing states in the nearly 75-year history of the United Nations. His momentous visit puts a spotlight on the climate crisis and the deepening threats to the ocean. I also commend Secretary General Guterres for leading the Climate Action Summit to raise ambition and increase climate action, an issue front and center to all small island developing states, and indeed the entire world. The climate disaster, crisis, emergency, threat, whatever you choose to call it, is not just a small island developing state problem or a European or American problem, but a problem of all humankind. Together we shall save ourselves, and together we shall all perish. Or together we shall all perish. Mr. President, beyond the significant importance of close cooperation with our developing partners, there are also complementary and significant steps we are engaging through South-South cooperation for the Sustainable Development Goals to be fully realized and implemented, including with regards to climate change and the ocean. Mr. President, as a big ocean state, Micronesia commands a major part of the Pacific Ocean, and we have delineated our maritime zones, including or according to the law of the Sea Convention. It will be a travesty, however, if our maritime zones and our rights thereto are challenged or reduced because of sea level rise, to which we are among the least of contributors. In this regard, we welcome the decision earlier this year by the International Law Commission to study the topic of sea level rise. I urge the international community to develop state practice that respects the permanence of maritime baselines and zones irrespective of sea level rise. Mr. President, Micronesia is actively participating in the negotiations for the PPNJ instrument. We look forward to concluding these negotiations in 2020 with a durable and practical agreement in place that takes into account, among other things, the special circumstances of small island developing states and relevant traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities, and prevents the disproportionate burden of conservation and management of resources from falling on small island developing states. As a big ocean state, a key concern for my small island country is rightly focused on a healthy ocean. The conservation and sustainable use of our ocean is a key driver to our country's sustainable economic development, prosperity, and stability. In that connection, as responsible stewards of the Blue Pacific, our Pacific leaders welcomed and committed themselves to eliminate marine litter and the urgency of implementing the Pacific Marine Litter Action Plan last year. This will make a real difference for our ocean's sustainability. Mr. President, We are a big ocean state. Our exclusive economic zone constitutes nearly 3 million square kilometers, or 1/3 of the size of Australia. The ocean provides Micronesia's wealth, be it in our fisheries or in our traditional culture of navigating by the stars. As part of the Blue Pacific continent, Micronesia is committed to the Pacific Island Forum's declaration to ensuring the long-term sustainability and viability of the region's fisheries resources, recognizing its centrality to the well-being of communities and economies. But the type of challenges for our Pacific region requires international cooperation to address the stark realities, among others, of large-scale, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities that ravage healthy fish stocks and undermine our prosperity and economic development. IUU fishing blatantly disregards our national laws, United Nations resolutions, and the region's resolve to sustainably manage and conserve our marine resources. It poses a grave threat to regional security. Mr. President, earlier this summer, the Secretary General, in his report to the UN Development System Reform, expressed his support towards the Northern Pacific, recommending a dedicated multi-country office to attend to the needs of the 5 Micronesian countries. Clearly, a new approach to meet the challenges of a vast region of the Pacific is of significant importance to us in our efforts to implement the Samoa Pathway and the 2030 Agenda. Decisions like these are of such importance to the greater Micronesian region, and I would like to emphasize here the important role that an on-the-ground MCO or multi-country office would play, and my gratitude to our Secretary General for the foresight in considering Micronesia as a region deserving of more focus. Mr. President, Excellencies, we need a United Nations that can meet the challenges of our 21st century, a United Nations dedicated to act with bold decisions to tackle the security threats of climate change, a United Nations dedicated to eradicate poverty and resolve armed conflicts, a United Nations dedicated to bring the poor out of poverty and to bring sustainable development to all. In short, a United Nations that leaves no one behind. And in the final analysis, the success of the United Nations rests upon the collective will of all 193 members of this assembly. I thank you, Mr. President, and to leaders around the world for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the government of the Federated States of Micronesia and the people of the Federated States of Micronesia. God bless the United Nations, and God bless the people of the Federated States of Micronesia. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency David Panuelo, President and Head of the Government of the Federated States of Micronesia. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the Head of State.